Did you know that nearly 40% of all food produced in the US ends up in landfills every year? That's over $161 billion worth of food. But what if you could reduce that waste while enjoying fresh, homegrown produce right from your backyard? Imagine harvesting your own tomatoes, lettuce, and herbs, and saving money while doing it. Today, I'm going to show you how to plan your garden like a pro, using a simple calendar, so you can grow your own food, cut down on waste, and get the most out of every square inch of your garden. Hey there, gardeners. Seedling, welcome back to Ibrahim Momo, where we grow together. Today, we're diving into something that every green thumb needs: a customized planting and harvesting calendar. Whether you're just starting out or you're a seasoned grower, having a clear timeline can make a huge difference. Let's get started. A planting and harvesting calendar isn't just a cute chart. It's your secret weapon for maximizing your garden's potential. By knowing exactly when to sow, grow, and harvest, you can avoid missing critical planting windows, ensure a continuous harvest, and save time and money by avoiding unnecessary replanting. Why bother with a planting and harvesting calendar? Because it's a game changer for every gardener, no matter the size of your plot. Let's break it down. Optimized growing time. Each plant has an ideal window for planting and harvesting. A calendar ensures you're not too early or too late, giving your crops the best chance to thrive. Continuous harvests. If you love fresh produce all season, a calendar is key. It lets you plan staggered plantings, also called succession planting. For example, planting a row of beans every 2 weeks can keep you harvesting fresh pods all summer. Maximize space and resources. Don't garden sit idle. A calendar helps you plan for multiple harvests from the same plot by rotating crops. For instance, you can plant spinach in early spring, followed by tomatoes in summer, and finish with a cover crop in fall. Avoid waste. Ever forget to harvest that zucchini and end up with a giant inedible squash? Or plant too much all at once, only to watch it spoil? A calendar helps prevent overplanting and ensures you're harvesting at the right time. Stress-free gardening. Gardening should be fun, not stressful. With a calendar, you don't have to constantly second-guess what to do next. It's your step-by-step guide for the season, keeping you organized and confident. Without a plan, you're gambling with your garden. A calendar makes sure you're planting smarter, not harder. And here's the best part. Your calendar doesn't need to be complicated. Whether you're jotting it down in a notebook, sticking Post-its on your fridge, or using an app, it's all about finding what works for you. So what are you waiting for? Let's take the guesswork out of gardening and grow with confidence. Before you start planting, there's one crucial piece of the puzzle that will guide your entire gardening journey: your growing zone. This is key to understanding what plants will thrive in your area and when to plant them. So what exactly is a growing zone? In simple terms, it's a region defined by its climate, specifically its temperature range. Different plants have different temperature needs, so knowing your zone helps you figure out which crops will succeed and when to plant them. In the United States, we use the USDA Hardiness Zone Map to categorize regions into numbered zones based on average winter temperatures. Each zone is further split into A and B subzones, which represent a 5-degree Fahrenheit difference in average low temperatures. For example, if you live in Zone 5, your average winter temperature ranges from -20 to -10 degrees Fahrenheit. So, you'll need to choose plants that can tolerate those cold winters, but will thrive once spring rolls around. For instance, tomatoes, which love heat, thrive in zones 10 to 11, while hardy vegetables like kale can grow in zones 3 to 4. Your zone gives you a starting point for selecting the right varieties, ensuring that your crops don't get shocked by unexpected weather. But it's not just about temperature. Your zone can also help you figure out things like the best planting dates, your frost dates, and the overall length of your growing season. Knowing your last frost date in spring and your first frost date in fall is one of the most important pieces of the puzzle. For example, if your last frost is in mid-April and the first frost hits around October 15th, you can calculate when it's safe to start planting cold-sensitive crops like peppers, beans, or melons. Now, if you're in a warmer zone, you may be able to grow a wider variety of plants or even have a longer growing season, allowing you to plant crops in both spring and fall. But for those in colder zones, The trick is making the most of the shorter growing season. This is where knowing your zone can really make a difference. You can also check with local gardening groups or agricultural extension offices for more specific advice based on your zone. Local experts know exactly what works best in your climate and can offer personalized tips. Once you know your zone, you're ready to plan your planting and harvesting dates with confidence. So take a few minutes to look up your zone and start choosing the best plants for your environment. Next, make a list of everything you want to grow. For beginners, think of versatile and easy crops like lettuce, tomatoes, or carrots. If you're more experienced, maybe you want to try something adventurous like artichokes or melons. To maturity, preferred planting times, spring, summer, or fall. Any special requirements like succession planting. Now that you know your zone and have a solid understanding of your growing conditions, it's time to make a list of the crops you want to grow. This step is essential because it helps you stay organized and make the most of your space, time, and resources. Start by thinking about what you love to eat. If you're growing food for your family, focus on crops you know you'll use regularly. If you're a beginner, start simple with vegetables that are easy to grow and maintain. For beginners, crops like lettuce, spinach, radishes, and carrots are great choices. These are quick-growing, low-maintenance plants that will help build your confidence. If you're more experienced, maybe you're dreaming of heirloom tomatoes, potatoes, or even fruit trees. When making your list, here are a few things to consider. Growing time. How long does it take for each crop to go from seed to harvest? Some plants, like lettuce, mature quickly, while others, like pumpkins, take the entire season. Spacing needs. How much space does each crop need to grow? Some plants, like tomatoes, require a lot of space, while others, like spinach, can be grown in compact areas. Watering and care requirements. Do the plants you're interested in need constant watering, or are they more drought tolerant? This will help you plan your garden's irrigation system. Be sure to think about the type of plants you want. Are you aiming for a vegetable garden, or are you also considering herbs, flowers, or fruit trees? It's also a good idea to mix in some plants that can benefit each other, like companion planting. For example, basil planted near tomatoes can help deter pests and improve flavor. Once you have your list, start categorizing the crops into groups like leafy greens, root vegetables, fruiting plants, and herbs. This will make it easier when planning out your garden beds. Also, think about the harvest. If you want a continuous supply of fresh produce, plan to plant crops in stages. For example, you can plant carrots every 2 weeks, so you always have fresh ones ready to pull up. Make sure to include perennial crops in your list as well. Things like asparagus, strawberries, and rhubarb will keep coming back year after year, saving you time and effort in future growing seasons. Finally, don't forget about your growing goals. If you want a garden full of color, perhaps you'll include some edible flowers like marigolds or nasturtiums. If you're focused on sustainability, look into companion plants or organic methods like growing nitrogen-fixing legumes to improve soil health. Your crop list is not set in stone. Over the years, you might try new varieties, or maybe you'll find out that a certain plant does really well in your garden. Keep updating your list based on your experiences and your growing goals. So take your time, think about your needs, and create a list that's tailored to your garden space and your lifestyle. It's a fun step and helps set you up for success all season long. Now it's time to map it all out. You can use a physical calendar, a whiteboard, or even a gardening app like App Suggestion. Start by marking your frost dates. Then, work backwards for spring planting and forwards for fall crops. Don't forget to add reminders for staggered planting. For example, planting lettuce every 2 weeks means fresh greens all season long. Now the fun part begins, creating your planting and harvesting calendar. This is where all your research and planning come together. Let's walk through how to build a calendar that will do through the growing season from start to finish. First, start by marking out key dates, like your last frost date in the spring and your first frost date in the fall. These dates are crucial for timing your plantings, especially for frost-sensitive crops like tomatoes, peppers, and basil. Once you've marked those frost dates, it's time to work backward for your spring plantings and forward for your fall crops. For example, let's say your last frost is around May 15th. You can start sowing seeds indoors for things like tomatoes or peppers about 6 to 8 weeks before that, which would be mid-March. Then, about 2 weeks before the last frost, you can start hardening off your seedlings by slowly introducing them to outdoor conditions. Don't forget to adjust for any early or late season crops you want to grow. Things like peas, spinach, and lettuce can handle some cold, so you can plant those earlier in the spring, even before the last frost date. Now, it's time to fill in the rest of your crops. Look at your list of plants and their days to maturity. This is the number of days it takes for each plant to go from seed to harvest. For example, lettuce takes about 45 to 55 days to mature, while carrots need around 70 days. Using these days to maturity, you can determine when to start seeds, transplant outdoors, and when to harvest. A calendar makes it clear exactly when your crops will be ready, helping you avoid those "I can't remember when I planted this" moments. To make things easier, try color-coding your calendar. For example, you can use green for leafy vegetables, yellow for fruiting crops, and purple for root vegetables. This makes it visually clear when everything is happening, and gives you a quick way to assess your garden's overall progress. Also, remember that some crops need a little extra TLC, like spaced-out plantings or regular harvest. You can add little reminders to your calendar for things like thin out beets or pinch off tomato suckers to keep everything growing strong. Don't forget to include other key gardening tasks too, like soil prep, fertilizing, and mulching. These are essential for healthy growth and need to be part of your planning. If you prefer digital tools, there are plenty of apps and online planners like App Example that let you build a personalized garden calendar with reminders and notifications. But if you're more of a hands-on person, a simple paper calendar or a garden planner book will work just fine. Another helpful tip is to use a spreadsheet. It's a fantastic way to create a dynamic, digital calendar that can be updated and printed anytime. Plus, you can track progress over the seasons to see what worked best. And here's something fun. Don't be afraid to experiment. Your first year using a calendar might not go perfectly, and that's okay. Over time, you'll fine-tune your timing and start to really understand how your plants behave in your specific climate and space. Flexibility is key. Weather can be unpredictable, and some plants may need more or less time than expected. Keep track of what works and what doesn't so you can improve your calendar for next year. Now that you've created your planting and harvesting calendar, it's time to talk about the most important step: fine-tuning your plan. Gardening isn't always a one-size-fits-all approach, and you'll need to adjust as you go to make sure everything's working in your favor. Let's dive into how to perfect your calendar throughout the growing season. Gardens are living things, so they can change from year to year. There are many factors that might affect your original plan, like weather, plant growth rates, or pests. This is why fine-tuning is so important. First, keep a close eye on how your plants are growing. Are they taking longer to mature than expected? Or perhaps they're growing faster than you thought? It's common for things to shift, so don't be afraid to adjust your planting and harvesting dates accordingly. For example, maybe your carrots are taking a little longer than expected. You might need to push back your harvest date or adjust your watering or soil conditions to speed things up. If you're noticing faster growth, you can plan an earlier harvest, giving you room to plant a second crop. Another key factor to consider is weather. If you're hit with an early frost, a heavy rainstorm, or a heat wave, your calendar will need adjusting. A quick freeze could shorten your growing season, or an unexpected warm spell might make some crops rush to maturity. Stay on top of local weather reports and keep track of your garden's progress. If you need to protect your plants from unexpected frost, consider using row covers or frost blankets to extend your growing season. It's also important to note any pest or disease issues. If you see pests or diseases attacking your crops, it's a good idea to note what worked and what didn't. Maybe you need to adjust planting dates to avoid peak pest season, or swap out a plant variety that's more resistant. Don't forget to record successes and failures in your garden journal or calendar. What varieties grew well and what didn't? Were there any surprising challenges you faced? These notes will help you adjust your plan for the following year, and you'll become more efficient with each season. As you fine-tune your calendar, also think about succession planting. If one crop has been harvested early, you may be able to plant another crop in that same space. For example, after harvesting your early spring lettuce, you could plant beans or another fast-growing vegetable to keep your garden productive. Track what you've harvested so far, and if there's space in your garden, try planting something else to make the most of the growing season. Succession planting ensures that your garden isn't sitting idle, and it maximizes your food production. And here's another great tip. Use interplanting to make the most of your garden space. This involves planting different types of crops close together in a way that benefits both. For example, planting bush beans between your tomato plants can help shade the soil, reduce weeds, and even improve your tomato yield. Interplanting works especially well when paired with companion planting strategies. For instance, basil and tomatoes are great companions because basil repels pests that target tomatoes while enhancing their flavor. Finally, your calendar should be a living document. It's not just something you write once and forget about. It should evolve with your garden. Keep adjusting it as you learn more about how your plants behave and how your garden responds to weather patterns. That way, you'll improve your planning year after year. As the growing season progresses, revisit your calendar. Maybe you'll find that some crops need more water or a little extra shade. Or perhaps a crop is outperforming expectations, and you can squeeze in a second harvest. Stay flexible and open to making tweaks as needed. Fine-tuning isn't just about making adjustments. It's about becoming more in tune with your garden's needs. The more you pay attention and adapt, the more successful and enjoyable your gardening season will be. Before we wrap up, here are a few pro tips. Companion planting can maximize your space and protect your crops. Use color codes for different plant types on your calendar: green for leafy greens, red for root veggies, and so on. And always include time for soil prep and cleanup. And that's it. With your very own planting and harvesting calendar, you're set up for a productive and stress-free growing season. What will you be planting this year? Let me know in the comments below. Alright, you've got your calendar set up and you're well on your way to gardening success. But before you head out to plant, I've got a few bonus tips to help take your gardening game to the next level. These are little hacks and helpful reminders that can make a big difference. Tip 1. Start small, scale up. If this is your first time creating a garden calendar, don't overwhelm yourself by trying to plant everything at once. Start with a few easy-to-grow crops, like lettuce, herbs, or tomatoes. As you get more comfortable with the planting process, you can gradually add more crops and experiment with new techniques. Tip 2. Use local resources. Your local extension office, gardening groups, or community centers are gold mines for regional advice. They'll have insight into the best planting times, weather patterns, and what varieties work best in your area. Don't hesitate to ask for help, especially if you're gardening in a new climate. Tip 3. Keep a garden journal. Along with your calendar, keep a garden journal where you can track plant progress, weather conditions, and any issues that arise. You can jot down notes on pest control methods, planting success, or anything that worked or didn't in your garden. This will help you make adjustments in future seasons. Tip 4. Don't overcrowd your plants. While it's tempting to fill every square inch of your garden, overcrowding can stunt growth and lead to disease. Make sure to space your plants according to their needs. It may look a bit empty at first, but as your plants grow, they'll fill in the space and thrive. Tip 5. Consider vertical gardening. If space is limited, consider vertical gardening. You can use trellises, towers, or hanging baskets to grow vining plants like cucumbers, beans, and peas. This frees up ground space for other crops and makes your garden more efficient. Tip 6. Use companion planting to boost growth. Some plants naturally benefit each other when planted together. For example, planting marigolds next to tomatoes helps deter pests, and basil planted alongside peppers can improve both flavor and growth. Do some research on companion planting to optimize your garden's productivity. Tip 7. Incorporate natural pest control. You don't need to rely on chemicals to keep pests at bay. Try using natural remedies like neem oil, diatomaceous earth, or attracting beneficial insects such as ladybugs and predatory beetles. Planting flowers like lavender or fennel can also attract pollinators and help control unwanted pests. Tip 8. Plan for a continuous harvest. To keep your garden productive all season long, plan for multiple harvests by using succession planting. After you harvest early crops like lettuce, replant the bed with beans or squash. This keeps your garden growing and ensures you'll have fresh produce well into the fall. Tip 9. Know when to harvest. Timing is everything when it comes to harvesting. If you wait too long, your crops can become overripe, bitter, or tough. Use your calendar to remind you of ideal harvest times and check your plants regularly for readiness. When in doubt, pick a little earlier rather than too late. Tip 10. Don't be afraid to experiment. Gardening is all about learning and adapting. Don't be afraid to try new varieties, experiment with different techniques, or adjust your planting schedule based on your experience. Over time, you'll find what works best for your garden and your specific growing conditions. Tip 11. Keep track of soil health. Healthy soil means healthy plants. Test your soil regularly, amend it with compost, organic matter, or natural fertilizers to keep your plants nourished. A calendar can also be a great tool for tracking when to add soil amendments or make changes to your garden beds. So there you have it, some bonus tips to make your garden even more successful. Remember, gardening is a journey. The more you grow, the more you learn, and every season brings new opportunities to improve. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to your channel name, and hit that bell icon so you never miss a gardening tip. Happy planting, everyone!